Well, thank you. Thank you for those introductions, Renil. And Kalpana, welcome. Thank you for making the time. I do recognize that you have another meeting later tonight, so you'd like to finish by 8:15. I'll make sure that we finish by 8:15. To all the folks watching this session, please post your questions. You can have this is a live session, so you can post your questions, but do so only in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the Q&A box, and whenever I get a chance, I'll ask Kalpana your questions. So with that, let's get started, Kalpana. I want to kind of start by using Renil's introduction. I want to take you way back. You did law, then cost accounting, and then joined insurance. Why?
Indeed, thanks a lot, first of all, for inviting me, giving this opportunity. It's been long, I think COVID times, etc. There were initially we were very gung-ho with the webinars, and then we got sick and tired. So this is the third wave, thankfully not of COVID, but our, love or hate with the webinars. So I'm in the right mood for your webinar. Thanks for inviting. Yes, you asked a very good question. Why insurance? Actually, insurance happened quite accidentally. I'm a commerce stream student, and every commerce stream students, I don't know about today, but those days either it is chartered accountancy or cost accountancy. Some few people would think of a company secretary, and beyond that, there was hardly anything that one thought of when one is a hardcore commerce grad. So cost accountancy falls in that line. That it was the logical next step post your BCom or alongside your BCom. You do either chartered accountancy or cost accountancy. So I did started working for that and applied for those. It was intermediate and final 4 groups. Started preparing for it. And those days the government jobs advertisement used to come, and all the commerce, people used to apply. So somebody got me a form, and the entire friend circle in college, entire girls gang was applying. So they gave me form. I didn't even buy my own form, 2 rupees or something like that. That also I got a gift, and I applied because everybody was. It was just peer pressure. Everybody's applying. You are also applying, and it was like a picnic, going for that exam, come from Thane, go to Dadar. It was just a day's outing, and I got selected. So then, suddenly there was a thought that government jobs in those days, way back in 84, 85, a lot of value, there was no privatization, that opening up of sectors in 91, which started, that had not happened at that time. So a lot of value for a fresher, BCom. It's just appearing for final BCom, getting a government job with a reputed, stable organization. Job of a lifetime, you will work there for your entire life, right? So just got it by just like a fluke. I got it, and then I entered the sector. And I did not leave my studies because the aim was never for insurance. You got the government job, you joined it, Kamaega types. And cost accountancy I completed after joining the job, and tried, then the dream was to become an accountant and work in that direction. But somehow by then I liked what I was doing. And I also understood it's a business, fine, it deals with numbers. My accountancy is not going to go waste here. Accountancy knowledge does not mean that you have to finally make profit and loss accounts and balance sheets. It's much more than that. It helps you even otherwise in any commercial organization, irrespective of what that business is. And life insurance is it's a legal, it's contracts. End of the day, it's insurance contract. So everything is terms and conditions and all. It's a lot of statistics, actuarial work, and contract work. So I finished. Actually, was a tough task. I didn't look in that direction, but the law I found easier and more interesting. So did a degree to help me the working better, and that's how the law happened.
Interesting.
So this is the history. If there is any behind this very odd-looking combination to your mind, maybe.
Interesting. And then you spent 16 years in LIC, right?
Yes,
16
yes.
plus years. And then came to ICICI Prudential. And I suppose that's when the private insurances opened up. Am I right? The government opened up that sector. You joined as a founding member. So curious to know, how was the transition? Because 16 years is a long time. As they say, 16 years is a long time for habits to set in.
16 years.
What habits changed when you moved to Prudential, ICICI Prudential?
Maybe, MD, this question is very frequently asked to me because public sector to private sector transition, and that too in a group like ICICI, which is sort of, it's a group which is on the forefront of most of the financial services. These are not small companies. They are big wherever they are. So how's the transition? In my case, as I mentioned, the original plan was always to work as an accountant. And accountant is more or less, in manufacturing, because cost accountancy is more used in manufacturing units, production houses. So it would have been a private sector most of the time. So that was the original purpose. Insurance I liked, continued. LIC gives you very strong foundation and very deep knowledge, very fine organization, and I'm eternally grateful for the strong foundation I got from there. That foundation knowledge, which is useful even today, is thanks to LIC. And I got it from there. But in 1993, government had appointed Malhotra Commission to look at the private sector opening and setting up something new, creating something new. LIC is a very well-run organization. It's a very large corporation when I joined, even then, 30, 35 years old at that time also. To create something new, to become a part of that creating thing was always a thrilling, thrilling thing to my mind. And since 93, I was waiting that, and it took 7 years for the sector to actually. So I was preparing for it, and I was willing to take that risk of leaving a government job. So when the opportunity came, I think in 2000 June, I was amongst the first few people who chose to leave the government job and join a private sector. People absolutely were saying that it's a very big risk, and leaving government job, it's a one-way ticket. I mean, you go out, you can never enter again. And private jobs, there is no job security. It's a risky business and all. But I was willing and ready long back. So to my mind,
so you didn't
for it long time, I didn't find any difficulty in adjusting. I never actually felt that I'm doing something, which is very different or which is very tough or nothing of that. My transition at least was very smooth.
Interesting. So you didn't let any of those habits set in. You were kind of looking forward to the privatization happening. That's what happened. Coming to ICICI Prudential, I have to tell people, I think quite a few people are watching us right now. So I have to tell them the story, and I'm sure Kalpana, you know the story. It was coming, right? So I was, sorry?
You still remember it?
Absolutely. I never miss a chance of telling this. So I'm not too sure. I mean, I'm sure, the people who are watching this show haven't heard the story. So I was in Dell. That was my last corporate job. I was leaving it to turn entrepreneur. And till that time, like, many of us, we were supported by our company's health insurance policy. And at that time, ICICI Prudential did sell health insurance. I think after that, they stopped. Something like that happened. But at that time, health insurance was being sold. So when I was stepping out, I said, I need to take a health cover for myself and my family, which earlier Dell was providing. So I went around hunting for it, and I came across ICICI Prudential. I got in touch, and then they sent me to this for medical tests. Went through the medical tests, and at that time, the medical tests were not shared with me. They used to directly go to the company. I think ICICI Prudential got it. And long story short, one morning I get a call from a lady, a lovely lady in ICICI Prudential, who says, I'm looking at your medicals right now. A number of the parameters are outside the range. But based on the questionnaire you filled out, it doesn't look like you have a kind of a family history of diabetes or any of that kind. Looks like it's all lifestyle induced. I'd suggest that you go see a doctor, because from what I see, this can be fixed. But what I want to tell you is that based on this, you're going to have, I don't remember the exact words, but it appeared to me that the premium will be much higher. And the advice to me from this lady was that, go see a doctor and get yourself kind of fixed. I'm going to hold this application for a few months. I don't remember how long the number of months was, but this was a wake up call to me, by the way. And I not only saw a doctor, but I also, at that time, I used to be 85 kilos. Right now, I'm 70, by the way. And I got myself working, and in, I think, 2 months, I brought myself down from 85 to 75. And also, one other thing this lady mentioned was that, I would request you not to go to any other insurance company. It'll be nice if you come back to me and come back to us. And that's how, by the way, my first health insurance policy got created after 3 months after I went back to this company. Company happened to be ICICI Prudential. And much later, I got to know that the lady who had called me was one Miss Kalpana Sampath. So, it's just amazing. So, Kalpana, I just have to ask you this question, because at that time, of course, we are talking about 20 years ago. This was 2002. At that time, of course, I was floored. I had never got that level of service from anybody. I mean, leave alone insurance, but anybody, no way of this kind of a service. What made you do that? What was that part of the culture? Was it the part of, that's how you wanted to manage customers? And how could you do it at scale? I mean, you can't do this with every person who was buying an insurance from you.
Good question, MD. I would say largely a part of the culture, also a little bit individualistic as well. As I said that insurance was my profession when I joined ICICI Prudential. The company might have started in 2000, but I was a professional 16 years before that in the same field. And I thought that this is where insurance actually can make a difference to the life. Why wait till something happens and then you pay claim? That's a different story altogether. But if you can help when somebody is there, okay, still there, why not help at that? Because of who sees anybody else's medical reports? Maybe only the doctors. That's your job, and people when they are sick, they will go there and show their reports, and that's what they do. Which other companies? None of your service providers like banks or whoever you buy things from are going to see your medical reports. We are the only ones, the insurers, right? And if we are in a position to help, I think we should try and save lives and tell people if we see something we cannot keep quiet, because it was very obvious, right? And that's the reason that the service call, the culture of the company, the culture of the team also. MD, every person is not having problem, but the few people which had problem, the effort of the companies at that time, because we could, when you load the premium, you are not ready for it as a customer and contractually, because end of the day, insurance is a legal contract. You have to give us permission and pay us extra money. Without your knowledge, we will not issue the policy. We have given you quote of 100 rupees, then we cannot charge you a paisa more than that unless you provide. We tell you and you accept those questions, right? Yeah. You will ask the reason. Why are you loading me? Your stated premium as per your brochure is this much for my age and my term, my sum assured. Why are you charging me more? We have to give you the reason.
Yeah.
And at that time, if we tell you that there is a fix, wait, improve this, come back, because this premium now you are going to pay for 15, 20 years. Why? You can correct this, reduce it, and then come back and you will get normal premiums. And this is where you would not go away. One, we take care of you, we create customer loyalty by doing really something which you would value. And secondly, then we create stickiness. See, you remember it after so many years. And we used
not
to
just remember, by the way, I'm still paying that. I'm still paying for that policy, by the way. I've never had a claim on that policy. Thank God for that. Never had a claim, but I'm still paying that. So there you go. I mean, talk about stickiness.
I thought it was anything, MD, my principle in life, and that's what I learned also from these great organizations where I worked. One-sided deals never continue. You cannot. It's only a win-win which helps in the long term. And this, to my mind, was a win-win-win. If I had to go to the customer and tell him that you need to pay extra for one or two, these are the reasons, and in full transparency, please take these reports. If you suspect these reports, you have an option of doing second checks on your own also. Company won't pay for it, but you please go ahead and check yourself if you are in doubt. But to our mind, this is the right way to do. So I thought that helped. It was a win-win. And
oh, absolutely, it was a win-win. But the more, I mean, generalizing this thing, you said that most people have, their metrics are proper, or their medical reports are
most of
okay.
them.
A few of them, and it's easy to pick out those few where it doesn't look right. Is it still doable? Because now everybody is at scale. I mean, there are millions of customers now. Is it still possible? Maybe using automation? Do you think that's still possible? Of somebody actually making the call like you did?
It is still possible, and I'm sure most of the companies are doing it, MD. Because quite a lot of business anyways go through straight through processing, automated underwriting, where no intervention is there. Medicals themselves are not required. But in few cases where they are required, and one sees abnormality, an attempt definitely is made to tell the person or talk to the customer in person. There also there will be categorization. Please understand, I was head of underwriting then when I called you. Depending on the case or who are you talking to, people would differently do it. But definitely the people who speak are fully trained people with medical knowledge. Only those people speak. The work is allocated, based on parameters, but attempt definitely is made. Sometimes the numbers are not contactable. Sometimes people refuse to speak. Sometimes people just give curt answers saying that, okay, I'll check with my doctor. All experiences do happen, but I'm sure that most of the companies, or nearly all companies, would definitely give it a try to seek and perform.
Sure. So from ICICI Prudential, of course, you went and joined Swiss Reinsurance. Just for our members' benefit, just give us a one-liner on what reinsurance really means. I'm not too sure if everybody understands. Everybody understands insurance, but what is reinsurance?
Reinsurance is insuring companies' insurance. So these are global players, and they pool the risk at the back end. So when you buy a policy of a company, you have a legal contract, insurance contract with that company, which everybody knows the top names, right? Or all names. And LIC is one of them, ICICI. There are n number. But the insurance company also has an option not to carry all this risk on their book, but get it insured with someone else. Now that someone else is a reinsurance company. They are never in the front. The contract is between the insurance company and the insured person. So you won't know whether your policy is reinsured with someone else, because customer has got nothing to do with it. Customer's contract and contact both are with the direct company, insurance company, from whom you have bought the policy. But insurance company at the back end will reinsure, will pay premium just like you pay to the direct company.
Sure.
They will pay a risk premium to the reinsurance company. And if a claim happens, the direct company will pay to the claimant. But if the contract is reinsured fully or to some extent, that amount will come from the reinsurance company. So entire thing not go out of their pocket. It's a risk mitigation tool.
So it's a B2B between insurance company and the reinsurance thing. So you moved your last kind of a position in ICICI Prudential was you were actually heading customer operations. Am I right?
Customer and operations, yes.
So in our parlance, you were the CCO. Okay.
Yes, CCO also in insurance companies they call Chief Compliance Officer. But
of course.
So this is Chief Customer Officer when you say
Chief
CCO.
Customer Officer, yes. Correct. Yeah, we are a Chief Customer Officer forum, by the way. So now we come to the main question of our entire talk. You moved from a CCO to a CEO of Swiss Reinsurance. What kind of new skills you had to build? What kind of a mindset did you have to go in with? Although I understand that Swiss Reinsurance is still a B2B company, not a mass market insurance company like an ICICI Prudential. But what change did you have to go through, and what skills you had to pick
up? Skills is when you suddenly become responsible for the P&L of the company. The first skill one should have is looking at the financial side of all that. While as a, in any prudent company, even in service, you do look at your cost benefit, right? Here, not only that you have to look at cost benefit, but you have to be an active earner. You have to get your numbers, business numbers. If it's insurance premium, direct insurance premium, reinsurance premium, whatever is your business. Those numbers, one needs to be acutely aware that business has to be done. All the governance has to be completely followed, and you have to keep an eye on profitability as well. So these are the additional things. While in customer service, you are more focused on customer experience, customer stickiness and loyalty. At that time, there is also at senior level, there is also you also are and have to be aware of the commercial angle of all of this. It's just that it is amplified and maybe more percentage of that commercial focus when you become the CEO. The things, ingredients remain the same, MD, nothing changes much. You need your customer to pay you and you need cost efficiency, you need governance, nothing changes. Only the proportion changes. That's what I told myself. Okay, you're more focused here now, there is a skew now. You shift more on commercial side. But tell me, even if you are CEO, paying less attention to customers, can you really sustain? So to my mind, and thankfully I have an accounting background, so it wasn't tough.
Yeah, it wasn't tough to, of course, understand financial statements and, P&L and all that. That wasn't. But what about the notion of you still need to grow now? I mean, you're responsible for growing the business, which means you need a strategy to compete with your competitors and kind of expand the market and all that. So how did you build kind of skills in those areas or exposure to those areas?
I think while you keep climbing the ladders in any organization, okay, you of course hear that service not for the sake of service, even if when you are customer service and operations, or I've done many other functions as well. End of the day, if your company grows, you will have more customers, you will have more service. There is no, or you will sustain in the first place if there is adequate new business. Stagnancy is not going to help. Organization will not remain to serve the customer. So sustainability and comes only when you have growth. So as you climb, I don't think so one has to specifically need to do something when one transitions. I think these are building blocks anyways of any personality or any professional. So when they start climbing the ladders, starting with LIC, different, their new business mattered or not. It's a public sector, but you will not believe the focus of new business even in that organization. So that you sort of keep learning every day, conferences, events, you see that the focus is there. So it sort of builds in. Only when I was not maybe responsible, but always going through and understanding and seeing that how new business is important, how P&L is important, how everything is important. And slowly that becomes a part of your understanding, your learning, and then one day you become responsible for delivering that as well.
Okay, interesting. So you're making it sound really easy, by the way. I think our members over here will be, hugely encouraged by your experience.
If you understand the fundamentals and not get unnecessarily complicate them, I think most of the things in life are easy, really simple. We'll complicate them is my view.
Yeah. What about the team building? Not team building, meaning getting the right talent in. What about that element of it? Because especially it's a new kind of a business you got into, and now of course you're back to a B2C business. Pramerica Insurance is a B2C business. No, you're back to a B2C business. So how important it is for you to get the right people in place, and how do you do it? Because in the customer operations, you do it, but not necessarily at that scale and at that depth.
MD, you said it very rightly that well begun is half done, and right person for the right job. Any leader, any role, if you are a manager of 2 people or 200 people or 2,000 people or anything more than that, if the choice of people, the right person is not kept at the right job, and then it's a disaster. And if things are messed up, so then cleaning them up is really, really pain, and you don't know what damage. And in a customer-centric organization or a B2C organization, that is really, really very, very painful. You know? So, to my mind, for any leader, the first step to success is numbers will come, everything will happen, but getting the right people in the right job is the most important skill I think a leader should have. Rest all can be supplemented, but this is the judgment and gut of a person, a leader. He has to have it himself. You know, any other skill set, and no leader knows everything. He will have to have complementary skills, and you have to have higher experts. You know, where who will help you achieving. You need 10 types of specialized skills. You don't have any maybe, or you may have one or two. Others you have to, they have to be your team members, but they have to be the right skill and right cultural fit as well. It's not only the skill, it's the cultural fit to the place that you are in. Unless that fitment happens, Andy, even the seemingly right skilled people are misfit, and then that's unhappy situation both for the person and for the company. So I guess
interesting. Sorry, go ahead, finish. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, go ahead.
I think most important thing, this is to my mind one very important skill which will define the success or otherwise of a leader. And leader, it doesn't mean only the CEO. Any leader who manages people, for this skill has to be developed, and it has to be very good when one reaches the top, because he has to exercise it so very often, or the impact is the widest at the top. So it goes on increasing as you climb. This one skill, you will not find a leader, MD, and you speak to leaders day in and day out, and you have been an entrepreneur, long experience. Have you seen any single leader who doesn't have this skill?
No, I mean, that is the most important. I mean, in fact, by the way, right through my, most of my jobs, even in Dell, by the way, I would interview is the wrong word. I would actually meet every person joining the company. And I wouldn't have a, higher decision, but I definitely will have a veto. Which brings the, interesting point you said, you talked about as cultural fit. So in a Pramerica insurance-like place, I suppose you kind of the founder of, were you part of the founding team again, or it already existed?
It's a 12-year-old company, MD.
Okay.
I have joined 3 years back, but it is a 12-year-old company. Yes.
Okay. So when you join a company, do you kind of try and create the new culture or create a culture which suits you, or you kind of adopt it?
See, when you are creating something, you have the freedom, right? But also depends on what are your peer sets. Nobody alone creates a company alone. It's a team, and the team and the promoters, and that sets the tone for the culture for that particular company. When you go in a running company, like for example, twice or thrice, right? LIC was a settled organ, very set structure. Again, ICICI was new thing. Swiss Re, though India branch is new launch, it's a 150-year-old company, and they have been in this country for 20-25 years. Again, a set culture. And this company, when I joined, was also 8-9 years already when I joined. I think first thing the newcomer has to do is to understand the culture. And I'm sure some homework has been done before you join at that company. To my mind, at senior levels, skill set, etc., is just a hygiene now. More importantly, the cultural fit, I guess, will define the success of that position and that person. So first of all, understand the culture and try to be a part of it. I think nothing should be, a person should not be in a hurry to brand something. This is good or this is bad, or not to be very judgmental very quickly. First, understand it and see how you connect with that. If there is something fundamentally not appealing to you, maybe cut the loss faster. But if that is not the case, something is not against your value system or ethos or your DNA, if that stark contrast is not there, then one has to try and adjust to the culture of the company. When one becomes a part of the team, etc., your personality anyways will have influence, which can be whichever way, good or bad. But when a person becomes a prominent member of the team, that person's culture or personality does have an impact around. So then you sort of start influencing, impacting, but as a part of the team. So I think it shouldn't be a, first thing is to plus coolly understand and not try in a hurry to, pass judgments on something which you see. Understand, find the reasoning, even if it doesn't suit, check with people before, forming a very quick opinion, because things are different in different places.
Of course, of course. So we have a couple of questions from the audience, Kalpana. So let me just read that out. Excuse me. So as the role changes from COO to CEO, is there any change you feel has arrived in overall perspective within, if any? How should one deal with it? Your views on it, please. Overall perspective.
Overall perspective, actually nothing. It's just the scope of your work widens, and because suddenly you have the company's responsibility. So your focus, customer becomes a part, but not the full portion. But because you will have people to take care of it now, do your erstwhile job, right? So you can give your vision or the company's vision there and leave it in those capable hands, and then move on to look after the entire well-being. You were looking after customers, now look after the entire company and ensure. So to my mind, it's only an enhancement.
Yeah, you have just more stakeholders to take care of.
To manage. Yes, your regulator will be there, your board will be there, the new business has to be taken care of, compliances. There are so a lot of work. I would say the scope of your job role increases. More than that, but if you are aware of your business, being a part, at senior levels, MD, when you transition, the core job is only one part of it. You are actively engaging in all other management activities, part of senior management decision-making teams. Anyways, you are there, right? It's just that you're not personally accountable or responsible, and you suddenly become responsible for that.
Sure. Okay, I'll go to the next question, which is asked. In your previous role as COO, you might have identified some opportunities and challenges within the organization. Now, as you are the CEO, how do you think about the design of your organization? Do you find it to be, do you tend to be intentional with it, or look for it to emerge organically? So what the question really is that, as a CEO, you would have seen some opportunities within the company. So when you transition to a CEO, how do you think about the design of your organization based on what your observations as a CEO, as a COO have been?
Yes, as the CEO, CEO was just a title. It's senior management, and you're responsible for many other things. It's not only focusing, that's your primary delivery area, but you're part of all other activities of the company, major decision makings, etc. Of course, you have formed impressions and you have believed and you have spoken up also, sometimes accepted, sometimes not accepted. Because end of the day, you never had a veto power there. And even if I have now, I would not like to use it very often. So I think it's a senior management team decision. As CEO, definitely one gets louder voice. To my mind, that's about it. The voice is a little bit louder, but end of the day, even the delivery has to happen through the teams. So the buy-in is very important. So you may get to speak little longer and little louder as CEO. More than that, nothing changes. You have to still, the senior management team has to get aligned to it, because if they don't buy in, they're not going to implement it. Right. So it's all going to remain on paper. So I had my ideas, maybe I'll speak about them, but I will also, somebody has taken over that job now, my erstwhile job. I would respect that person. That person has to run with it, right? I'll just park it there and then go with any other, not insist because they were my ideas, they were the right ideas. Now, if he has to carry that mandate, it's just my thoughts, take it from here now.
Sure. Final question. I think we are just around 6-7 minutes away. We'll wrap up as well. So final question, Kalpana, COVID. This question, I'm sure so many people have asked you. Last, 18 months have been extremely difficult, especially when, this thing hit us, we went into lockdown and, all that. So from your perspective as a leader, what were your learnings? I mean, what did you have to change? What thought processes you had to change? How did you react differently, if at all? What happened in the last 18 months from a leadership perspective?
From a leadership perspective, MD, every business has been impacted here. Okay, because their revenues dried up. We were in the lockdown, so hospitality, airlines, you mentioned the sector shops because they were closed, people lost jobs, no money in the spending pipe reduced. So that plus people lost lives. The second wave was very, very bad. Everybody has, nobody who has not lost either a colleague or a friend or a relative or someone known. It has sort of, second wave was really, really bad. So, and we are in an industry, we are actually, the industry we got actual financial impact because of COVID. Health insurance got health insurance claim multiple times of their normal, whatever usual business claims, and life insurance also got because of the loss of lives. All of us have got multiple times, 2, 3, 4 times number of claims. So we are seeing death claim, we always see, and we see how people live midway and what suffering families, grieving people. But we are, in our mind, we feel, okay, I can't do anything much, at least financially, here is some help because he had an insurance policy, right? We feel, okay, this is, he did it, we are not doing anything special, but maybe that money at that point of time is going to be very, very useful to the family. And now we have seen this multiple times, right? So we are an impacted industry. We are seeing the deaths very closely. Others definitely have lost the revenue, but we are seeing the death side of it very closely. And that's a very sad experience, seeing young lives lost. What as a leader, I have realized that, first keep your people safe. We are driving our vaccination drive very hard. That's all we can do, MD. Beyond that, how that virus comes and goes and what mutations have, we have no idea. I know, we know that there is this one thing available which will definitely reduce the risk of mortality. So we are promoting employees, nearly all are vaccinated in 9 months. Nearly all, 99 point some percent. That's a very, because we care for their lives. Tomorrow they may stay with us, may not stay with us, no problem. But they will be alive wherever they are. And that's very important for them and their families. With policyholders, we are pushing this drive not to save on claims or something. It is for their well-being. If something can help to save the life, it should be done. It must be done. So that's it, because we have seen it very close.
And how do you do that besides communicating to your policyholders? What else do you do for them? I mean, is there?
We have done, SMS campaigns. We do various campaigns, right? For selling, for paying renewal premium, for servicing. Yeah. Here there is a specific campaign, nothing to do with our selling or something, nothing to do with premiums. It's just that please get vaccinated. Our regulator also wished us to do that. And irrespective we were doing, and there was also they requested us that, to your partners, to your agents, to, of course, your employees and your whoever deals with you, please promote vaccination. Please tell them how to do that. And we have done it not because we wanted to put a tick mark in some tick box. We really believed in it, and we have done it with all our sincerity.
Of course. Okay, Kalpana, one final question. This is from the audience again, and after that we'll wrap up. Do you feel that CCO, that is Chief Customer Officer, is a natural successor to the CEO because as he or she is closest to the voice of the customer? So the question is, does the CCO become a natural successor? Interesting question.
In corporate world, nothing is natural actually. One has to prove. There are many contenders. See, their position is one, and all the one downs are the contenders. I think natural, nothing. There's nothing natural. It's all about the skill sets and your competition. No? If there can be a CFO who's a contender, there is the chief distribution officer who can be the contender. There can be also appointed actually.
No,
Maybe
I think what this person is asking is because the CCO is closest to the voice of the customer. So does that get any kind of brownie points, extra points for it?
see, customer understanding the customer is always going to be helpful in the business, indeed, and without doubt. But for being a CCO, there is a lot of other skill sets which are also important. So there has to be there are brownie points and there are additional points. But then other skill sets will come in, and then the entire scorecard will be presented, and that's how it will be decided. That's why I said natural. No. Yeah, but brownie points, yes. Added
Lovely,
weightage,
lovely.
yes.
Lovely. Okay, excellent. I think that is fantastic. We are 8:13 right now, and we'll, as I said, we promised to let you go by 8:15. So, Kalpana,
I think if you
thank
ask
you.
more, then the audience is going to get bored, So we shouldn't be troubling them.
By the way, some of our sessions have actually gone on for, I don't know, past the hour mark and all that, but doesn't matter. This has been a fascinating session. I think it's a very focused, very relevant topic, given the fact, by the way, last time the person who spoke was a CCO. He talked about the role of a CCO. So this was a nice follow-up kind of a talk. Kalpana, fantastic. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, insights. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the audience, which came in on Wednesday instead of the usual Thursday. Thank you all. And just remember, you can, we'll be sending out email as well. The recording of this talk will stream live at the same time, usual time, 7:30 p.m. tomorrow on YouTube. Members will get an email separately with a link to that. And also, I want to thank Freshworks, who's partnered with us for this talk. Thank you very much. And with that, let me hand over to Renil. Renil, all yours.
Thank you, MD. Thank you, Kalpana. It was indeed a enriching conversation on the industry itself. I think a lot of us don't know the nitty-gritties of the insurance industry, and it's certainly a very eye-opening talk. Thank you for the audience as well for joining in. Like MD said, on a Wednesday and not on a middle week, it's pretty tough when we understand you taking the time off. Yes, and with that, we'll look forward to our next session, which is the last Thursday of next month, and you will soon get invites for that. Once again, thank you, Kalpana. Thank you, MD.
Thank you, Renil, and thank you, MD. Thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure, as usual, to talk to you.
Thank you, and bye-bye. Good night.
Thanks. Bye.